Marry me for 1 year, and I'll solve every problem you have. Madison Reed thought it was a joke the first time she heard those words. Standing on the 42nd floor of Hayes Capital, she stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Manhattan skyline, glowing beneath the late afternoon sun. The office looked less like a workplace and more like a private kingdom built above the clouds. And sitting behind a massive black desk was the man who ruled it all. Sebastian Hayes, 36, billionaire, CEO. The man business magazines called ruthless, brilliant, and impossible to read. Madison tightened her grip on the folder in her hands. "You want me to pretend to be your fiancée?" she asked. Sebastian's expression never changed. "For 1 year." His voice was calm, controlled, almost cold. "My board wants stability. Certain investors want proof that I'm planning a future beyond quarterly reports. A public engagement solves several problems." Madison blinked. "And why me?" For the first time, something almost resembling amusement flickered across his face. "Because you're the only person in this city who told me no." 3 weeks earlier, Madison had been hired to organize a charity gala for Hayes Capital. During a meeting, she had openly criticized one of Sebastian's ideas in front of his executives. Everyone else in the room looked terrified. Sebastian had simply watched her. Ever since then, he seemed strangely interested in her opinions. Madison looked away, trying to ignore the way her heart raced. This was insane. Completely insane. Yet her thoughts drifted back to the stack of overdue medical bills sitting on her kitchen counter. Her father's treatments. The calls from creditors. The apartment lease she was struggling to keep. Every month felt like a battle she was slowly losing. Sebastian opened a thin folder and slid it across the desk. "Read page 4. Madison hesitated before opening it. Her breath caught. The compensation was enough to erase every debt she had. Enough to help her father. Enough to give her a future again. "There has to be a catch," she whispered. "Several," Sebastian replied. "You'll attend events with me. Public appearances. Interviews. You'll wear the ring and maintain the image." Madison glanced down. Resting inside a small velvet box sat a diamond ring, so stunning it almost looked unreal. Light scattered across the stone like tiny stars. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "It's not real," Sebastian said. Madison looked up. "What?" "The engagement is a contract. The ring is part of the contract." For some reason, that answer disappointed her more than it should have. The room fell silent. Outside, helicopters crossed the skyline. Traffic moved like rivers of light far below. Finally, Sebastian stood and walked toward the window. His reflection stretched across the glass. Powerful. Untouchable. Alone. 1 year, he said quietly. Then we both walk away. Madison looked at the ring again. A fake promise. A fake relationship. A fake future. Yet it was the only opportunity she had left. Slowly, she picked up the pen. Sebastian turned back toward her. For the first time, something unreadable flashed behind his gray eyes. Madison signed her name. Neither of them realized that the fake ring sitting between them would become the one thing neither of them would ever truly be able to let go. The next morning, Madison stood in front of a mirror that cost more than her monthly rent and wondered how her life had become unrecognizable in less than 24 hours. The penthouse overlooking Central Park felt impossibly quiet. Sunlight spilled through walls of glass, painting gold across polished floors and designer furniture. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Reed," a woman called from outside. "Your stylist has arrived." Madison closed her eyes. Stylist. Another word that did not belong in her world. 2 hours later, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her reflection. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves. The tailored cream-colored dress fit perfectly. Even the tiny diamond on her finger seemed determined to convince the world that she belonged beside Sebastian Hayes. Except she knew the truth. It was all borrowed. All temporary. All fake. By noon, she was seated across from Sebastian in a private conference room inside Hayes Capital. A stack of documents rested between them. "Ground rules," he said. Madison raised an eyebrow. "You make fake engagements sound incredibly romantic." His expression remained unchanged. Rule 1. No discussing the contract with anyone. Reasonable. Rule 2. No interviews without approval from my communications team. Less reasonable. Rule 3. We maintain appearances at all public events. Madison nodded. And Rule 4. Sebastian leaned back slightly. Do not fall in love with me. For a second, she simply stared at him. Then she laughed. Trust me, that will not be a problem. Something flickered across his face before disappearing. Good. The strange thing was that he almost sounded disappointed. Over the following days, Madison was introduced to a world she had only seen in magazines. Luxury hotels, private dining rooms, charity boards, investors worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Everywhere they went, cameras followed. Headlines appeared online within hours. America's most eligible billionaire finally engaged. Who was Madison Reed? Social media exploded with theories. Madison tried not to read any of it. She had more important things to focus on, like remembering which fork belonged to which course during formal dinners, or learning the names of dozens of influential people who somehow expected her to know exactly who they were. Through it all, Sebastian remained calm, controlled, untouchable. Yet the more time she spent around him, the more she noticed small contradictions. Every morning he arrived before anyone else. Every night he stayed long after the offices emptied. He rarely smiled, rarely relaxed, rarely spoke about anything personal. It was as if his entire life revolved around protecting walls nobody else could see. One evening, after another exhausting charity event, Madison stepped onto the penthouse terrace for fresh air. The city stretched endlessly beneath the stars. A few moments later, the sliding door opened behind her. Sebastian appeared, loosening his tie. You handled yourself well tonight, he said. Was that a compliment? Do not get used to it. Madison smiled despite herself. Then her gaze drifted toward him. For just a second, the powerful billionaire looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying a weight he refused to share. Before she could say anything, his phone buzzed. Instantly, the walls returned. His expression hardened. The distance came back. Sebastian glanced at the screen and turned away. Madison watched him disappear inside and suddenly realized something unsettling. The man the world feared might also be the loneliest person she had ever met. Over the next month, their lives settled into a strange rhythm that neither of them had expected. To the outside world, Sebastian Hayes and Madison Reed looked like the perfect power couple. Their photographs appeared in business magazines. They attended charity dinners, investor conferences, and fundraising galas together. Headlines praised their chemistry. Comment sections debated their love story. Yet behind closed doors, everything remained carefully defined by the contract. At least that was what both of them kept telling themselves. One Thursday evening, Madison found herself standing beside Sebastian at a luxury hotel ballroom overlooking the Hudson River. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead while executives and donors moved through the room, carrying glasses of sparkling water and champagne. The event celebrated a new community development initiative funded by Hayes Capital. Madison had spent weeks helping organize every detail. As the night unfolded, she watched Sebastian effortlessly command every conversation around him. Investors listened when he spoke. Politicians respected him. Even competitors seemed careful around him. He carried authority the way most people carried their wallets. Naturally, quietly, without effort. But what surprised Madison was not how powerful he was. It was how often his attention drifted toward her. Whenever a reporter approached, he subtly moved closer. Whenever she looked uncertain, he appeared beside her before she could ask for help. Small gestures, almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore once she noticed them. Later that night, after the final speech ended, Madison escaped to a quieter balcony overlooking the river. The cool air felt refreshing after hours of smiling for cameras. She rested her hands on the railing and watched reflections dance across the dark water. The balcony door opened behind her. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. Hiding? Sebastian asked. Recovering, she corrected. There is a difference. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. You did well tonight. That is twice now. Twice what? Twice you have complimented me. He looked almost offended by the accusation. Do not make a habit of counting. Madison laughed. The sound surprised both of them. For a moment, neither spoke. The city lights stretched endlessly around them. Then Sebastian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Something immediately changed in his expression. The warmth disappeared. The walls returned. Everything okay? Madison asked. Work. His answer came too quickly. Before she could respond, he ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. You work too much, she said. That is how companies stay successful. And is that how people stay happy? The question lingered between them. Sebastian looked away toward the skyline. For the first time since she had met him, he seemed uncertain. Happiness is not a business objective, he finally said. Madison studied him quietly. Most people saw a billionaire, a CEO, a man who could buy almost anything he wanted. But standing beside him now, she saw something else. Someone who had spent so long building an empire that he no longer remembered what to do when the day ended and the offices became empty. As they walked back inside, cameras immediately turned toward them again. Sebastian offered his arm automatically. Madison slipped her hand through it. The gesture was supposed to be part of the performance. Yet neither of them noticed how natural it had started to feel. 2 weeks later, Hayes Capital announced its most ambitious project of the year, a luxury waterfront hotel development worth nearly $1 billion. The project immediately became the center of attention across New York, attracting investors, media coverage, and some of the most respected professionals in the country. Madison spent most of her mornings coordinating meetings and reviewing event schedules, while Sebastian buried himself in negotiations. Everything seemed to move at a relentless pace until the day the lead architect arrived. Madison was reviewing presentation materials in a conference room when the door opened. A tall man with sandy blonde hair and an easy smile stepped inside, carrying a portfolio case. "Please tell me I am not late," he said. "Because if I am, I have an entire speech prepared about Manhattan traffic." Madison laughed before she could stop herself. "You are 5 minutes early." "Perfect. Then I can still blame traffic." He extended his hand. "Adrian Brooks." Madison shook it. "Madison Reed." Within minutes they were talking as if they had known each other for years. Adrian possessed a natural warmth that put people at ease. He joked with assistants, remembered names, and treated everyone in the room with the same respect. It was refreshing, especially in a world where most executives measured conversations by how useful they were. Throughout the meeting, Adrian repeatedly turned to Madison for input on guest experiences, public spaces, and community engagement. Unlike many consultants, he actually listened to her ideas. By the end of the afternoon, they had exchanged several suggestions and enough jokes to make the long meeting surprisingly enjoyable. As the team packed up, Adrian smiled. "I owe you lunch. Half of these ideas came from you. I am pretty sure that is not how architecture works. Trust me, it is exactly how architecture works." Neither of them noticed the figure standing outside the glass conference room. Sebastian had arrived moments earlier. He said nothing as he watched Adrian make Madison laugh. The sight should not have bothered him. There was no reason it should bother him. Adrian was a respected professional. Madison was free to have friends. The arrangement between him and Madison was a contract. Nothing more. Yet for some reason, Sebastian remained standing there a second longer than necessary before continuing down the hallway. Later that evening, Madison returned to the penthouse carrying project notes and a takeout container she had barely touched during the day. She found Sebastian in the living room reviewing financial reports on a tablet. "Long day?" she asked. "Productive day." His eyes remained on the screen. Madison dropped into a nearby chair. "The architect is great." Sebastian finally looked up. "Adrian Brooks?" "Yes. He is funny, smart, easy to work with." Sebastian's expression remained neutral. "That is why he was hired." Madison nodded, unaware of the subtle change in his tone. "The project is going to be incredible." Sebastian returned his attention to the tablet. The conversation should have ended there. Instead, his mind unexpectedly replayed the image of Madison laughing in the conference room. The sound had been genuine, effortless, different from the polite smiles she gave investors and reporters. For reasons he could not explain, the memory stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Over the next several days, the waterfront project became the center of everyone's attention. Meetings filled the calendar from morning until evening, and Adrian seemed to be involved in all of them. Madison found herself working closely with him as design plans evolved. The more time they spent together, the more she understood why clients loved him. Adrian had a way of making complicated problems feel simple. He listened before speaking. He remembered details. He treated every conversation like it mattered. One afternoon, they were reviewing renderings in a conference room overlooking the East River when Adrian pointed at a rooftop garden design. "I still think this section needs something." Madison studied the image. "Maybe a small outdoor art space." Adrian snapped his fingers. "Exactly. That is why I like working with you. Madison laughed. Because I solve your problems? Because you make my projects better. The compliment caught her off guard. Before she could respond, two members of the design team entered the room carrying coffee. One of them glanced at Adrian and then at Madison with an amused smile. You two look like you have been working together forever. Adrian grinned. Great partnerships happen naturally. Madison rolled her eyes but could not stop smiling. Across the building, Sebastian sat through a board meeting discussing projected revenue forecasts. Normally, he could focus on numbers without effort. Today was different. His attention drifted more than once. When the meeting finally ended, he stepped into the executive hallway and unexpectedly spotted Madison and Adrian walking toward the elevators. They were talking about something. Madison laughed. Adrian laughed too. The sound echoed through the corridor. Sebastian slowed his pace. He immediately disliked the strange feeling settling in his chest. It made no sense. Madison was free to talk to anyone she wanted. Nothing about their agreement gave him a reason to care. Yet somehow he cared anyway. That evening, a small group gathered in the executive lounge after work. The atmosphere was relaxed. People talked about the project, upcoming events, and weekend plans. Madison stood near the refreshments table speaking with several team members while Adrian described a recent project in Chicago. Someone eventually asked the question. So, Madison, what is your professional opinion of our famous architect? She smiled. Honestly, another employee said. Madison glanced toward Adrian, who immediately looked suspicious. That expression never leads to anything good. Laughter spread through the group. Madison shook her head. Fine. My professional opinion is that he is talented, ridiculously charming, and probably responsible for at least half the smiles in this building. More laughter followed. Adrian placed a hand dramatically over his heart. I would like that quote framed. Madison smiled and added the sentence that changed everything. And let us be honest. The man is incredibly handsome. The room erupted with teasing applause. Adrian bowed theatrically. Madison laughed again. What she did not notice was the sudden silence behind her. Near the entrance, Sebastian had just arrived. His expression remained perfectly calm, controlled, professional. Yet his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His eyes settled briefly on Adrian before moving to Madison, then back to Adrian again. Nobody noticed the shift except one executive standing nearby. The man quietly cleared his throat and decided it was the perfect moment to leave. Sebastian said nothing, not a single word. But for the first time in years, the billionaire who controlled billion-dollar negotiations felt something he could not control at all. The following week, something began to change, and everyone noticed it except Madison. Sebastian suddenly seemed to be everywhere. If she had a planning meeting with Adrian, Sebastian appeared halfway through with a question that could have waited for an email. If she and Adrian grabbed coffee during a break, Sebastian somehow needed Madison's opinion on an urgent matter. If Adrian stopped by her office to discuss design revisions, Sebastian would call her upstairs within minutes. At first, Madison assumed it was coincidence. Then it happened too often to ignore. One Tuesday afternoon, she was reviewing landscape concepts with Adrian in a sunlit conference room when Sebastian walked in without warning. There you are, he said. Madison looked up. There I am. The investors moved tomorrow's briefing to today. Adrian glanced at the clock. In 15 minutes? Sebastian nodded. Exactly. Madison frowned. Nobody told me. I am telling you now. Adrian watched the exchange carefully. The moment Madison left with Sebastian, he sat back in his chair and smiled to himself. Something interesting was clearly happening. Later that evening, Madison found herself seated across from Sebastian in the penthouse dining room. Can I ask you something? She said. You usually do. Have you always been this involved in the hotel project? Sebastian calmly set down his fork. It is a billion-dollar development. That is not an answer. Then perhaps it is a billion-dollar answer. Madison narrowed her eyes. You are impossible. For the first time all day, a genuine smile appeared on his face. Unfortunately for Sebastian, his behavior only became more noticeable. At Hayes Capital, rumors spread with incredible speed. Employees began exchanging knowing looks whenever Sebastian interrupted one of Madison and Adrian's conversations. Several executives quietly placed bets on how long it would take before the CEO admitted what everyone else already suspected. One Friday morning, Madison entered the executive lounge and immediately noticed the room become strangely quiet. Conversation stopped. People suddenly became very interested in their coffee cups. "Okay," she said. "What is going on?" Nobody answered. Across the room, Adrian nearly laughed. "I think everyone is afraid of your fiancé." Madison blinked. "Why?" Adrian lifted an eyebrow. "You really have not noticed?" "Noticed what?" Before he could answer, Sebastian entered the lounge. His gaze immediately landed on Madison and Adrian standing together near the windows. For a fraction of a second, something dark flashed across his expression. It vanished so quickly most people would have missed it. Most people were not Adrian. "Good morning," Adrian said cheerfully. "Sebastian." "Adrian." The two men exchanged polite smiles that somehow felt less than friendly. Madison looked between them. "Am I missing something?" "No." Both men answered at exactly the same time. The room fell silent. A few employees suddenly found urgent reasons to leave. Madison stared at them suspiciously. Adrian looked amused. Sebastian looked irritated. And for the first time, Madison began to wonder if the strange tension she kept feeling had a very specific cause. The only problem was that the answer seemed completely impossible. After all, Sebastian Hayes was the man who had written one rule into their contract above all others. Do not fall in love. Yet lately, he was acting like a man fighting a battle against feelings he no longer knew how to hide. The annual Hayes Foundation Gala was the most anticipated event of the season. The ballroom occupied the top floor of one of Manhattan's most prestigious hotels, with walls of glass revealing a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Crystal lights sparkled overhead while members of New York's business elite filled the room. Madison had attended dozens of events since signing the contract, but tonight felt different. She could not explain why. Perhaps it was the tension that had quietly followed her and Sebastian for weeks. Or perhaps it was the fact that Adrian had spent most of the evening making her laugh. Whatever the reason, she felt unusually aware of everything around her. The music shifted as the live orchestra began playing a slower piece. Couples moved toward the dance floor. Adrian glanced at Madison and offered a friendly smile. "Would you like to dance?" he asked. Madison hesitated for only a second. "Sure." They stepped onto the dance floor as the music continued. Nothing about the moment was inappropriate. It was simply two friends enjoying a dance at a formal event. Adrian kept the conversation light, joking about impossible deadlines and demanding clients. Madison found herself laughing again. Nearby, several guests watched with approving smiles. Across the ballroom, Sebastian stood speaking with investors. At least he appeared to be listening. In reality, he had not heard a single word for the past 30 seconds. His attention remained fixed on the dance floor, on Madison, and on the man standing beside her. The uncomfortable feeling he had been fighting for weeks returned stronger than ever. He tightened his grip on the glass in his hand. One investor finally noticed. "Sebastian?" the man asked. "Are you all right?" Sebastian forced himself to look away from the dance floor. Of course. But even he could hear how unconvincing the answer sounded. The music continued. Madison smiled at something Adrian said. That smile was enough. Before he fully thought through the decision, Sebastian set down his glass and started walking. Several executives noticed immediately. One woman quietly whispered to her husband, "Oh no." Another executive suddenly looked fascinated by the ceiling. Nobody wanted to be caught in whatever was about to happen. Madison was still talking to Adrian when a familiar voice appeared beside her. "May I cut in?" Both she and Adrian turned. Sebastian stood there in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his expression calm. Too calm. Adrian looked between them and immediately understood. To his credit, he handled the situation gracefully. "Of course," he said. "She is technically your fiancée." Madison opened her mouth to protest that nobody had asked her opinion. Unfortunately, Sebastian had already offered his hand. The entire ballroom seemed to be watching. Reluctantly, she accepted. Moments later, they were dancing together beneath the chandeliers. Neither spoke at first. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Madison looked up. "What was that?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "What was what?" "You know exactly what." His eyes met hers. For a brief second, the polished billionaire mask cracked. She saw frustration, vulnerability, something dangerously close to jealousy. Then it vanished. "You belong beside me tonight," he said quietly. Madison stared at him, stunned by the intensity behind the words. Around them, conversations had resumed, but neither seemed aware of the crowd anymore. For the first time, Madison could no longer pretend she imagined the tension between them. And for the first time, Sebastian realized he was losing the battle he had sworn he would never fight. The gala ended, but the tension followed them home. The drive back to the penthouse passed in complete silence. Manhattan's lights blurred beyond the windows while Madison replayed every second of the evening in her mind. By the time the elevator doors opened onto the private residence, her patience had disappeared. She stepped inside and turned toward Sebastian. Enough. He loosened his tie without looking at her. Excuse me. You heard me. Madison crossed her arms. What happened tonight? Sebastian remained silent. The silence only made her more frustrated. You interrupted my dance. It was one dance. Exactly. One dance. So why did you act like that? His jaw tightened. You are overthinking this. Madison laughed in disbelief. No. I think I am finally seeing it clearly. For the first time, Sebastian looked directly at her. The air between them felt heavier than it ever had before. Then tell me what you think you see. Madison reached for the ring on her finger. The same ring he had given her the day they signed the contract. The same ring that symbolized an arrangement neither of them were supposed to take seriously. Slowly, she removed it. Sebastian's eyes immediately followed the movement. I think you forgot what this is, she said quietly. She placed the ring on the kitchen counter between them. It is a contract. Nothing more. The words landed harder than she intended. Sebastian stared at the ring. Neither spoke for several seconds. If that is true, Madison continued, then why do you care who I talk to? Why do you keep finding reasons to interrupt every conversation with Adrian? Why did you pull me away tonight? Sebastian looked away first. That alone shocked her. He always seemed to have an answer for everything. Tonight, he looked like a man searching for one. Madison, no. I deserve the truth. Her voice softened. Because I cannot keep pretending I do not notice what is happening. The city hummed quietly beyond the glass walls of the penthouse. Finally, Sebastian exhaled. A long, tired breath. The kind a person releases after carrying something for far too long. I tried to follow the rules, he said. Madison frowned. What? A bitter smile appeared on his face. The contract. The rules. The distance. All of it. He looked at the ring again. I wrote those rules because they always worked before. Before what? His eyes met hers. There was no billionaire confidence left in them now. No executive mask. No emotional armor. Just honesty. Raw and unguarded. Before you. Madison's heart skipped. Sebastian took a step closer. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself you would leave after a year and everything would return to normal. His voice lowered. Then somewhere along the way, normal stopped being enough. Madison could barely breathe. Sebastian, when you laugh with him, I notice. He gave a quiet shake of his head. When you smile at him, I notice. When he walks into a room, I immediately look to see if you are looking too. He laughed once, humorlessly. I hate that I notice. The confession hung between them. Madison stared at him in stunned silence. The man who controlled boardrooms and billion-dollar deals looked completely helpless. You were jealous, she whispered. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. Yes. The single word carried more honesty than anything he had said since the day they met. When he opened his eyes again, they remained fixed on hers. Not because of the contract. Not because of appearances. His voice softened. Because I fell in love with you, and I do not know how to stop. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass walls while the truth settled between them. Madison looked at Sebastian and saw none of the certainty that usually defined him. The billionaire who always had a plan suddenly seemed vulnerable. Human. Real. You fell in love with me? She asked softly. Sebastian gave a small nod. I did not mean to. A faint smile touched Madison's lips. That might be the least romantic confession I have ever heard. To her surprise, Sebastian laughed. The sound was quiet but genuine. I am not very good at this. No, Madison agreed. You really are not. The tension that had filled the room for weeks finally began to fade. Madison glanced at the ring resting on the counter. The same ring that had started everything. The fake promise. The fake engagement. The fake future. Then she looked back at Sebastian. Do you know what the worst part is? She asked. What? I think I started falling for you a long time ago. For a moment, Sebastian simply stared at her, as if he was not quite sure he had heard correctly. Then the realization reached his eyes. Relief. Hope. Happiness. Emotions she had never seen there before. 3 months later, The waterfront hotel project officially opened. The grand opening attracted media coverage from across the country. Investors, architects, city officials, and community leaders filled the stunning property overlooking the river. Adrian stood near the entrance speaking with reporters when Madison approached him. "Congratulations," she said. "You built something incredible." Adrian smiled warmly. "We built something incredible." He glanced around before lowering his voice. "And for the record, I am very happy the two of you finally figured it out." Madison laughed. "Was it that obvious?" "To everyone except the two of you." Across the rooftop terrace, Sebastian was finishing an interview. Their eyes met through the crowd. Even now, the look they shared felt different than it once had. No contracts. No pretending. No walls. Just honesty. As the evening sun began sinking behind the skyline, Sebastian approached her carrying a small velvet box. Madison immediately recognized it. Her heart started racing. "Sebastian, before you say anything," he interrupted gently, "there is something I need to fix." Several nearby guests began noticing what was happening. Conversation slowed. Cameras turned. Sebastian opened the box. Inside was a ring. This one was different. Not because it was larger or more expensive, because it was real. "The first ring was part of a contract," he said. "A business arrangement." His voice remained steady, but Madison could see emotion behind every word. "This one is not." The rooftop grew completely silent. "You changed my life long before you changed my heart," Sebastian continued. "You taught me that success means nothing if there is nobody to share it with. You made a penthouse feel like a home. You made me look forward to tomorrow." He took a slow breath. "And if you are willing, I would like every tomorrow after that." Madison felt tears gathering in her eyes as Sebastian knelt before her. "Madison Reed, will you marry me?" She did not hesitate. "Yes." Applause erupted across the rooftop. Somewhere in the crowd, Adrian shook his head with an amused smile. Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time, it felt exactly as it should. The fake promise that had brought them together was gone. In its place stood something far stronger. Something neither contract nor circumstance could create. A real future, a real family, and a love that had started the moment neither of them realized they were already breaking every rule they had written for themselves.